You're the responsible one, so you'll babysit while your sister is on vacation. My father's words hung in the air over our Sunday breakfast table, delivered between bites of pancakes as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. Not a request, not a question, a statement of fact, an assignment already decided. I set my coffee mug down carefully, buying time to process what I'd just heard. Across the table, my older sister Natalie didn't even look up from her phone, scrolling through Instagram as if this conversation didn't concern her because it didn't. Her vacation plans were apparently non-negotiable. My plans, however, Dad, I began, keeping my voice measured. I have a major project deadline that week. I've mentioned it several times. I can't just drop everything to Emma, he interrupted, using that tone that suggested I was being difficult. Your sister hasn't had a break in years. She deserves this trip with Mark. They need time alone before the wedding. Natalie, finally glancing up, offered me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's just for days, Em. The kids adore you, and I'd feel so much better knowing they're with family rather than a stranger. 4 days. 4 days of managing my 7-year-old niece's dance schedule, my 5-year-old nephew's severe food allergies, and my own looming deadline for the architectural designs. That could determine my future at the firm, all because, once again, I was a responsible one, the family designation that somehow always translated to sacrificing my needs for everyone else's. What about Mom? I suggested, grasping for alternatives. She's retired now. She could. Your mother and I are visiting Grandma that weekend, you know that. Dad replied, his tone indicating this discussion was already over. Besides, you're so good with the kids. Natalie needs someone she can trust completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was responsible enough to be entrusted with the care of 2 young children for 4 days, but apparently not responsible enough to have my career commitments respected or my time valued. I looked at Natalie, now back to scrolling through photos of tropical beaches, already mentally checked out of both our family breakfast and the care of her children. At 34, 2 years my senior, she'd always been the family golden child, charming, spontaneous, the life of every party. She'd also consistently relied on others to clean up her messes, both literal and figurative. It had been this way since childhood. Natalie broke the rules, I followed them. Natalie created chaos, I restored order. Mom bustled in from the kitchen with fresh coffee, oblivious to the tension. More pancakes. Anyone, Emma? Honey, you've barely touched yours. I've lost my appetite, I muttered, pushing back from the table. Excuse me. In the guest bathroom of my parents' suburban home, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. At 32, I had built a life I was proud of, a rising career in architectural design, a cozy apartment in the city, a small but solid circle of friends. Yet somehow, when I crossed the threshold of my childhood home for these weekly family breakfasts, I reverted to the responsible middle child, eternally expected to accommodate everyone else's needs while mine were afterthoughts. My younger brother Jake, 28 and living across the country in Seattle, had escaped this dynamic by sheer geography, but I'd stayed in Chicago, just 30 minutes from our parents' house, close enough to remain ensnared in these family expectations. A gentle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Emma? My mother's voice, concerned. Are you okay, sweetie? I opened the door, forcing a smile. Fine. Just needed a minute. She studied my face, the way mothers do. You know, if the babysitting is really going to be too much with your work deadline, I'm sure we could figure something else out. Your father just assumes it's fine, Mom, I interrupted, the words automatic. The responsible daughter's script. I'll make it work. I always do. Relief visibly washed over her face, which only intensified my frustration. She'd offered an out she didn't really want me to take, and I responded exactly as expected. The perfect, practice dance of our family dynamics. You're always so good about these things, she said, patting my arm. I don't know what we'd do without you. Back at the table, plans were already being discussed as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. So Emma will come Thursday evening, Natalie was saying, tapping dates into her phone calendar. Our flight leaves Friday morning at 9 a.m. We'll be back Monday night around 8. But if you could stay until Tuesday morning to help get the kids to school, that would be amazing. 5 days, not 4. Of course. I can drop the kids' schedules, emergency contacts, and allergy information at your place this week, she continued, not looking up. Oh, and Lucas has a doctor appointment Friday afternoon, just a checkup. But they might want to retest his allergies. My father beamed at me. See how perfectly this works out. You can work remotely from Natalie's house, and the kids will have their Aunt Emma's full attention. I opened my mouth to object, to clarify that meeting a critical project deadline while caring for 2 young children would be anything but perfect, but something in my father's expression stopped me. The pride in his eyes wasn't just about solving the childcare dilemma. It was about me specifically, his reliable daughter, the one who always came through. It was both a blessing and a curse to be seen that way, to have earned that confidence through years of putting others first. Great, I said instead, the word tasting bitter. Sounds like a plan. Later, as I helped clear the breakfast dishes, my mother nudged me gently. I'm sorry about all this, Emma. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now. I shrugged, rinsing syrup from a plate. It's fine. The kids are great. They are, she agreed, lowering her voice as she glanced toward the living room where Natalie was showing Dad Vacation rentals on her tablet. But Natalie sometimes takes advantage of your good nature. She always has. The acknowledgement, rare for my mother, who typically smoothed over family tensions rather than naming them, caught me off guard. Then why does Dad always take her side? I asked, the question slipping out before I could reconsider. My mother sighed, handing me another plate. Your father sees what he wants to see. Natalie reminds him of himself at that age, impulsive, charismatic. He thinks she needs his support more because she's less steady. And I'm just expected to be the steady one, picking up everyone else's slack. No, my mother said, then hesitated. Well, yes, sometimes. But it's because we know we can count on you. That's a compliment, Emma, is it? I challenged quietly. Because from where I'm standing, being the responsible one feels a lot like being taken for granted. My mother had no answer for that, and we finished the dishes in silence. Driving back to my apartment later, I called my best friend Mia, who answered on the second ring. How was family breakfast? She asked, knowing the weekly ritual. The usual, I replied, then filled her in on the babysitting situation. Mia, who'd known me since college and had witnessed countless instances of my family's dynamics, didn't bother hiding her frustration. Emma, you have got to start setting boundaries with them. Your big presentation is that Friday. Can't you just say no? I tried, I said, merging onto the highway. But you know how it is. Dad makes these pronouncements and everyone just falls in line. Everyone meaning you, Mia pointed out. Meanwhile, Natalie gets to jet off to Cabo with her fiancé, and your parents get to visit grandma. And you're left juggling your career and someone else's kids. Put that way, it did sound absurd. What would you do? Call Natalie right now and tell her you can't do it, Mia said without hesitation. Not won't, can't. Your job depends on this presentation, Em. She was right, of course. The practical, logical part of my brain knew that. But the responsible sister, the good daughter, those deeply ingrained identities pulled at me with familiar gravity. I'll think about it, I promised. That means you're going to do it, Mia sighed. Just like you watched her cat when she went to Paris last year. Even though you're allergic. Just like you helped her move on the same weekend as your architecture licensure exam. I passed that exam, I pointed out. Not the point, Mia shot back. The point is, your family has decided you're the safety net. And they'll keep landing on you as long as you let them. By the time I reached my apartment, a text from Natalie was waiting. Thank you. You're the best sister ever. Just booked our flights. I stared at the message. At the decision apparently finalized without any further input from me. My father's words echoed, you're the responsible one. It wasn't just a statement about my character. It was a life sentence to always putting myself last. Inside my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and surveyed my living room, where my drafting table sat by the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. Scattered across it were the preliminary designs for the cultural center that had consumed my nights and weekends for months. Our firm was competing for this contract against larger companies, and my boss had taken a chance putting me in charge of the proposal. Your vision for the space is exactly what they're looking for, he told me. Don't let us down. Now, just 2 weeks before the presentation, I was expected to put it all aside to babysit. Because I was responsible. Because I was reliable. Because I always said yes. I crossed to my drafting table and ran my fingers over the blueprints. The culmination of years of education, ambition, and hard work. This project could be my breakthrough. The moment I transitioned from promising junior architect to someone taken seriously in the field. And my family hadn't even asked if the timing worked for me. They'd simply assumed I would rearrange my life to accommodate theirs. Again, before I could overthink it, I pulled out my phone and called Natalie. Hey, Em, she answered, sounding distracted. Can I call you back? I'm looking at swimsuits online. No, this can't wait, I said firmly. I need to talk to you about next weekend. Oh my God, thank you again for agreeing to watch the kids. Mark and I are so excited. It's been forever since we had a proper vacation. I took a deep breath. That's the thing, Nat. I can't actually do it. A pause. What do you mean, you can't do it? Dad said you were fine with it. Dad assumed I was fine with it, I corrected. But I have a major work presentation that Friday. It could determine whether I get promoted or not. I can't jeopardize that, even for my niece and nephew. But Natalie's voice shifted from confusion to the slightly petulant tone I recognized from childhood. When she wasn't getting her way, we already booked the flights. Non-refundable. Dad said you'd handle it. I'm sorry about that, but this is too important. You'll need to find another sitter. In less than 2 weeks? That's impossible, Emma. You know how particular I am about who watches the kids. The irony of her being particular about childcare, while being perfectly willing to dump them on me regardless of my circumstances, wasn't lost on me. I can help you find someone, I offered. Or maybe Mom and Dad could change their plans to visit Grandma. Why are you being so difficult about this? Natalie demanded. It's just a presentation. Can't you reschedule it? No, I can't reschedule a major client presentation for our entire firm, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. Just like you can't reschedule a doctor's appointment for Lucas or Zoe's dance recital. My work matters too, Nat. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Natalie spoke, her voice cooler now. I'll have to tell Dad you're bailing on us. The implied threat, that her father would be disappointed in me, might have worked in the past, but something has shifted inside me. A tectonic plate of resentment finally breaking free. Go ahead, I replied. I've already texted him to let him know I can't do it. My career is just as important as your vacation. Another long pause. I don't even recognize you right now. You've never been selfish like this before. It's not selfish to prioritize my own life sometimes, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. I'm sorry about your vacation plans, but this is non-negotiable for me. After we hung up, I sat at my drafting table for a long time, staring at the designs that represented so much of what I'd been working toward. A strange mix of guilt and liberation washed over me. Guilt for disappointing my family. Liberation for finally standing my ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Call me. We need to talk about this babysitting situation. I set the phone aside without responding. For once, the family crisis would have to wait. The responsible one had her own responsibilities to attend to first. My father called 5 times that Sunday afternoon. I let each call go to voicemail, a small rebellion that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Instead of immediately resolving the family crisis as I typically would, I focused on my project, losing myself in the precise lines and measurements of the cultural center design. When I finally listened to his messages around midnight, they followed a predictable pattern: initial confusion, then disappointment, then the guilt trip, and finally, resignation. Emma, this isn't like you, his final message said. But I suppose we'll figure something out. Your mother suggests we might need to cancel our trip to Grandma's, though she'll be very disappointed. Call me back when you're ready to discuss this like an adult. The implication was clear. My decision was childish, irresponsible, a departure from my usual reliable self. And yet, as I crawled into bed that night, I felt more like my authentic self than I had in years. Monday morning brought a text from my mother. Dad's still upset. Natalie too. Can we find a compromise? Always a peacemaker, my mother. I texted back, I'm truly sorry, but my presentation can't be moved. Happy to help find alternative childcare options. At work, I threw myself into finalizing the cultural center designs, grateful for the distraction from family drama. My colleague Chen noticed my intensity as I hunched over my drafting table during lunch. Everything okay? He asked, setting a coffee beside me. You seem focused. I laughed without looking up. That's one word for it. Deadline stress? Partly, I admitted. Also family stuff. Chen nodded knowingly. He'd heard enough stories about my family dynamics over the 2 years we'd worked together. Let me guess, responsible Emma is expected to save the day again? Not this time, I said, finally looking up. I actually said no. His eyebrows shot up. Seriously? What was the request? Babysitting my sister's kids for 5 days while she's on vacation, including the day of our big presentation. Chen let out a low whistle. That would have been insane. Good for you for saying no. My family doesn't see it that way. I sighed. My dad's furious. My sister feels betrayed and my mom's caught in the middle trying to broker peace. Let me ask you something, Chen said, leaning against my desk. If the situation were reversed, if you needed your sister to do something important for you, but it conflicted with her vacation, what would happen? I didn't even need to consider the question. She'd go on vacation, and everyone would understand because that's just how Natalie is. But how Emma is apparently means always being available to everyone else, Chen observed. That seems unfair. It was unfair. I'd always known it on some level, but hearing someone else articulate it so clearly was validating. Thanks for the coffee, I said, suddenly eager to change the subject. Want to review these elevation drawings with me? By Wednesday, the family standoff continued. Natalie had stopped speaking to me entirely. My father had moved from anger to passive-aggressive disappointment, sending a family photo album link with pictures of me happily playing with my niece and nephew. My mother called daily with updates and peace offerings. "Your father and I have decided to cancel our trip to Grandma's," she announced during our Wednesday call. "We'll watch the kids." Relief washed over me, both that my niece and nephew would be well cared for, and that I was officially off the hook. But it was followed quickly by a familiar wave of guilt. "Mom, I'm sorry you have to change your plans. I know Grandma was looking forward to seeing you." "It's not ideal," she admitted, "but family comes first. You have your presentation, Natalie has her trip, and you and Dad have to sacrifice your plans," I finished. "That doesn't seem fair either." My mother sighed. "Life isn't always fair, Emma. Sometimes we do things for family even when it's inconvenient." "I know that, Mom. I've been doing that my entire life." A pause. "What do you mean?" The question opened a door I'd kept carefully closed. "I mean, I'm always the one expected to drop everything when someone needs something. I've rearranged my schedule countless times for Natalie, for you and Dad, even for Jake when he's in town. But the one time I need to prioritize my career, I'm made to feel selfish." "That's not true," my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? When was the last time Natalie sacrificed anything for me? Or the last time Dad called her selfish for putting her needs first?" The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken family history. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice quieter. "I hadn't thought about it that way. I suppose we do take your reliability for granted sometimes." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, the first time anyone in my family had recognized the imbalance I'd felt for so long. "I appreciate you and Dad watching the kids," I said, softening my tone. "And I promise I'll make it up to Grandma next month." "I know you will, sweetheart. You always do." There it was again, the expectation of responsibility, the assumption of sacrifice. But this time, I let it go. Some patterns couldn't be changed overnight. Thursday evening, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some toys and books I bought for my niece and nephew to enjoy during their stay with my parents. It was a peace offering of sorts, a way to show I cared about the kids even if I couldn't babysit them. My father answered the door, his expression guarded. "Emma, didn't expect to see you tonight. Just dropping off some things for the kids," I explained, holding out the gift bag. "Thought they might enjoy these while they're staying here." He accepted the bag, examining its contents, a Lego set for Lucas, a sketch pad and special colored pencils for artistic Zoe. "That was thoughtful. I do care about them, Dad. I just couldn't sacrifice my career this time." He nodded slowly, then stepped aside. "Your mother's in the kitchen. Come in for a minute." In the familiar warmth of my parents' home, I found my mother baking cookies, her standard stress response. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, comforting and nostalgic. "Emma," she exclaimed, wiping flour from her hands. "What a nice surprise." "I was just dropping off some gifts for the kids," I explained, accepting her flowery hug. "How are the arrangements coming along?" "All set," my father said, following me into the kitchen. "The kids will stay here from Friday until Monday evening. Your mother's prepared the guest room, and I've taken Friday off work to handle Lucas's doctor appointment." The efficiency with which they'd resolved the situation left me with mixed emotions. Relief that everything was handled, guilt that they'd had to change their plans, and a lingering frustration that this solution could have been reached days earlier without all the drama if they'd simply respected my initial refusal. "What about Grandma?" I asked. My mother exchanged a look with my father. "We've postponed that visit until next month." She was disappointed, but she understands. Of course she understood. In our family, plans changed, sacrifices were made, and life went on. But usually, I was the one doing the sacrificing. This role reversal felt strange, uncomfortable. "I could visit her the weekend after my presentation," I offered, "to make up for you missing this visit." My father shook his head. "That's not necessary, Emma. We'll reschedule." "I don't mind," I insisted. "I'd like to see her anyway." Another exchange glanced between my parents, loaded with unspoken communication. Finally, my father spoke, his voice carefully measured. "Emma, you don't always have to be the one to fix things. We're capable of managing our own relationship with Grandma." The statement, delivered matter-of-factly, hit me with unexpected force. You don't always have to be the one to fix things. How many family crises had I stepped in to resolve over the years? How many times had I rearranged my life to accommodate others' needs? And how much of that was actually necessary versus expected because of the role I've been assigned and accepted? "I know you are," I said finally. "I guess I'm just used to being the fixer." "We've relied on that too much," my mother admitted, returning to her cookie dough. Maybe this situation is a wake-up call for all of us. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My father went to answer it, returning moments later with Natalie, who stopped short when she saw me in the kitchen. "Oh," she said, her tone cool. "I didn't know you'd be here. Just dropped off some things for the kids," I explained, already reaching for my purse, preparing for a hasty exit to avoid conflict. "That was nice," Natalie replied, her tone softening slightly. "They'll be thrilled. Especially Zoe. She's been asking when she'll see you again." The mention of my niece sent a pang through my heart. I adored those kids, which had made saying no to babysitting them all the more difficult. "Tell her I'll take her to the art museum next weekend." After my presentation, Natalie nodded, then hesitated. "About that, I'm sorry I didn't take your presentation seriously. Mark pointed out that I'd be furious if someone expected me to miss an important work event for babysitting. Coming from my sister, this was practically a groveling apology. I blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected acknowledgement. "Thanks, Nat. I appreciate that." An awkward silence settled over the kitchen until my mother, ever the mediator, offered cookies to everyone. As we sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Sunday's tense breakfast had unfolded, I felt a subtle shift in our family dynamic. Not a complete transformation, but a recalibration. Small cracks in the rigid roles we'd all occupied for so long. "So," my father said, dunking his cookie in milk, "tell us about this presentation that's so important." The question surprised me. My family rarely asked specifics about my work, usually glazing over when I discussed architecture. But my father seemed genuinely interested, so I explained the Cultural Center project, the sustainable design elements, the community spaces, the historical references incorporated into the modern structure. "It sounds impressive," he said when I finished. "No wonder you couldn't reschedule." "I'd love to see your designs sometime," Natalie added. "Maybe the kids would too. Zoe's been talking about being an architect lately." "Has she?" I couldn't hide my pleased surprise. "I could show her some basics next time I see her." As the conversation continued, flowing more easily than it had in years, I realized something important. By saying no to one request, I'd opened the door for my family to see me differently, not just as a reliable problem solver, but as a person with her own priorities and passions. When I left my parents' house that evening, Natalie walked me to my car. "For what it's worth," she said, hands shoved in her jacket pockets against the evening chill, "I'm glad you stood up for yourself. It was probably overdue." I studied my sister's face, searching for the sarcasm or hidden agenda I'd grown accustomed to detecting. But she seemed sincere, almost admiring. "Thanks," I said simply. "Have a great trip. You deserve some time away. And you deserve to rock that presentation," she replied. "Though I never doubted you would. You've always been the capable one." The familiar label, capable, responsible, reliable, didn't sting quite as much coming with this new recognition. Perhaps being the responsible one wasn't a sentence to eternal self-sacrifice, but rather a strength I could wield on my own terms, choosing when and how to deploy it. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I are proud of you, not just for being responsible, but for knowing when to put yourself first. Good luck with your presentation." It wasn't a complete resolution to years of family dynamics, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that even the responsible one had the right to her own priorities sometimes. And as I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years, as if setting this boundary had relieved me of a burden I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. Inside, I returned to my drafting table, to the project that had inadvertently catalyzed this family reckoning. The clean lines and thoughtful spaces at the Cultural Center seemed even more meaningful now. Not just a professional opportunity, but a personal milestone, proof that I could stand my ground, that my work mattered. That being responsible didn't have to mean being eternally available. Friday morning, as I prepared for the presentation, a delivery arrived. A small potted plant with a card signed by my parents and Natalie, "To new growth, and setting healthy boundaries. Knock 'em dead today." I placed the plant on my windowsill, a visible reminder that family relationships, like carefully tended plants, sometimes needed pruning to grow stronger. Being the responsible one had shaped me, but it no longer defined me entirely. And that, perhaps, was the most important design I'd ever created. A blueprint for a more balanced life. Friday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. Standing in my apartment, I smoothed down my charcoal suit and checked my portfolio one final time. The Cultural Center designs represented months of work, innovative community spaces, centered around a sustainable structure that honored the neighborhood's history, while looking toward its future. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Knock 'em dead today, architect extraordinaire." Another message appeared from Chen. "Conference room is set up. Clients just arrived." They were excited to see your designs. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my materials. Had I agreed to babysit, I would have been juggling my nephew's doctor appointment and my niece's after-school activities while trying to prepare for this career-defining moment. The thought strengthened my resolve about the boundary I'd set. At the firm, our senior partners and the client committee were already seated around the conference table when I arrived. My boss, Richard, gave me an encouraging nod as I arranged my presentation materials. "The floor is yours, Emma," he said, gesturing toward the waiting clients. For the next 45 minutes, I presented my vision with clarity and confidence I hadn't known I possessed. I detailed the environmental innovations, the flexible community spaces, the subtle architectural references to the neighborhood's industrial past. Questions came rapid fire from the committee, which I answered with precision. When the head of the client group leaned forward and said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for, someone who understands both our heritage and our aspiration," I knew I connected. As the meeting concluded, Richard pulled me aside. "Outstanding work, Emma." They were impressed and so am I. "I think we got this contract locked down." "Thank you for trusting me with this," I replied. "You earned it," he said, then paused. "By the way, Chen mentioned you almost had to cancel because of family obligations?" "Almost," I confirmed. "But I realized this was too important to miss." "Good call. Sometimes a responsible thing is putting your priorities first." Walking back to my desk, I was flooded with text notifications, congratulations from colleagues who'd heard how well the presentation went. Among them was a message from my father. "Hope your work thing went well. The kids are asking about you." My work thing. Still minimizing my career. Still framing my professional achievement as less important than family obligations. But this time, rather than feeling the familiar sting, I smiled slightly. Old habits die hard for all of us. I texted back, "Presentation was excellent. Thank the kids for their good luck wishes. I'll see them next weekend." Later that evening, as I celebrated with Mia and other friends at our favorite bar, my phone rang with an unknown number. Stepping outside to take the call, I was surprised to hear Richard's voice. "Emma, I wanted you to be the first to know. We got it. The Cultural Center contract is ours. The committee just called to confirm." The news sent a wave of elation through me. "That's amazing. I can't believe they decided so quickly." "They were unanimous," Richard replied. "And there's more. They specifically requested you as lead architect. This is huge for your career trajectory." After the call ended, I stood on the sidewalk outside the bar, city lights blurring through happy tears. For once, being the responsible one had meant being responsible to myself first, and it had paid off more beautifully than I could have imagined. Sunday breakfast at my parents' house had a different energy this week. As I brought a platter of French toast to the table, my father looked up from his newspaper. "There she is, the lead architect," he announced with genuine pride that caught me off guard. Natalie, tanned from her beach vacation, raised her coffee mug in a toast. "Congratulations, sis. Mark and I read about the Cultural Center project online. It sounds incredible." "Thanks," I said, settling into my usual chair. "It's a big opportunity." My mother squeezed my shoulder. "We're all so proud of you, Emma." The conversation flowed naturally to my project details, my sister's vacation stories, and my parents' rescheduled visit to grandma. No tension, no guilt trips, just families sharing a meal and their lives. After breakfast, as Natalie and I washed dishes, she lowered her voice. "The kids had fun with mom and dad, but they missed you. Maybe next weekend you could take them for an afternoon." "No pressure." "I'd love that," I replied. "How about Saturday? I could show Zoe some basic architectural sketching." "Perfect." And Emma, she hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said, about always being expected to drop everything. You were right. I've taken advantage of your reliability for years." The admission, so unexpected from my typically self-absorbed sister, left me momentarily speechless. "Mark pointed out how one-sided our relationship has been," she continued. "I want to do better. Maybe I could watch your cat next time you travel for work." I laughed, remembering how she complained incessantly the one time I'd asked her to feed my cat. "That would be nice, actually. I have a conference in Boston next month." On the porch as I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology, Emma. I've put unfair expectations on you because I knew you wouldn't let me down." "That wasn't right." "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." "Your work is important," he added. "Not just a work thing." "I'm sorry I didn't see that before." Driving home, I realized something profound had shifted. My family still saw me as responsible, but now with respect, rather than expectation. By finally saying no, I'd opened the door to more balanced relationships. The following Saturday, I took my niece and nephew to the park. As Zoe concentrated on sketching a bridge while Lucas built elaborate structures in the sandbox, I received an email notification about the Cultural Center project's first planning meeting. What are you smiling about, Aunt Emma? Zoe asked, looking up from her drawing. Just thinking about how we get to design our own lives, I replied. Just like we design buildings. With responsibility, she said seriously, echoing a word she heard associated with me countless times. Yes, I agreed, watching Lucas carefully balance another stick on his creation. But also with boundaries that keep the whole structure standing strong.